If you're looking for some nice fragrance choices for the spring, but you don't want to break the bank, we're going to be taking a look at 8 fragrances that work great for the spring season. And the total cost that I paid for all of these fragrances was $189.53. To put that in perspective, that's about $10 less expensive than it would cost for you to get the new 60 ml YSL Elixir today. Also, this list is not in any particular order. All right, so the first fragrance we're going to start off with is Jimmy Choo Man Ice. So what I like about this fragrance and why I really love it for the spring season is because it's a citrus-heavy fragrance that smells like a fresh glass of lemonade. It opens up with a lot of citruses like bergamot, citron, and lemon. It's just very fresh and invigorating. And underneath those citruses, it has a little bit of woods and musk and some ambroxan that gives it a little bit of that effervescence. It's just a very clean, citrus-heavy, and invigorating fragrance. And this is actually one of my favorites on this list. As with a lot of citrus-dominant fragrances, the downfall for this one is going to be the longevity. I get about 4 hours out of this. I will also add that if you have smelled Dior Homme Cologne before, this is very close to that fragrance, especially in the opening, but at a much more affordable price. So if you like the Dior version, then you should like this one as well. As far as price goes, you can get the 1.7 ounce for usually around the $25 price point. Next up, we have Mont Blanc Individual. So this is probably the second most popular fragrance by Mont Blanc, behind Mont Blanc Explorer. So while this did come out in 2003, it is still very wearable today. So this fragrance smells like fresh, clean, dryer sheets with a little bit of fruitiness to it. Now, the main fruity note that I smell is raspberry. So I will say this is a very different and unique fragrance. It's nothing like any of the modern fragrances that have been released in the last 10 years or so. So this one is fresh, clean, and soapy with a little bit of sweet fruits, which is predominantly that raspberry note. It's extremely versatile. It's a very uplifting and fresh scent. You'll kind of get that clean vibe from it as well. So this is also very similar to Creed Original Santal, or actually I would say Creed Original Santal is very similar to this one because Mont Blanc Individual came out a few years before the Creed did. You can find this at most rack stores for the $20 or $25 price point, and you can get it at pretty much any online discounter as well. I will say that this is probably not a blind buy scent because it's just a little unique with that raspberry and clean dryer sheet smell. To me, this is perfect for springtime based on the scent profile. I do find it to be a little sweet and a little cloying in the high heat of the summer, which is why I like to break this one out a lot during spring. All right, next up we have Hugo Reverse by Hugo Boss. So this is probably one of my newest fragrances in my collection. I actually just bought this spring. So this is very grapefruit forward to me with some herbs and a dry down of some vetiver. So to me this is very fresh. It's citrus forward in the opening. I get a lot of grapefruit, which turns into a slightly citrus, herbal, and earthy fragrance. It's pleasing and slightly energetic. It's very inoffensive. A lot of people comment that it is on the synthetic side, which, yes, it doesn't have a perfect grapefruit note like you would get out of some of the more expensive designer fragrances. But then again, I think I paid $23 or $24 for the small bottle, and I think you can get the larger size for around $30. So again, we're looking at budget spring fragrances here. Although this is an extremely simple fragrance, it doesn't have that wow factor. I just really love it in the springtime. It's easy, it's inoffensive, it's something to spray on for a casual spring day. It's really hard to dislike it, in my opinion. Now, of course, the biggest downside to this fragrance is going to be your performance. You're going to get 3-4 hours tops out of this, so do keep that in mind. All right, next up is a Mont Blanc Legend Spirit, and this is probably one of the overall best fragrances on the list because of several reasons. One, it's extremely versatile. Two, it's probably the best compliment puller on this list. Three, it's inoffensive, it's mass appealing, and it's not really pigeonholed like some of the grapefruit or citrus dominant fragrances on this list. So Mont Blanc Legend Spirit is a freshie. It opens up with a lot of citrus like grapefruit, and it also has that a little bit of sweetness to it along with that watery accord to it. It's very similar to fragrances like the OG Invictus, like Rasasi Hawaz. That's the type of fragrance it is. Of course, it does its own thing. It dries down into a real fresh fragrance with some pink pepper, a slight bit of woods, and a little bit of herbalness to it. Overall, it's just a really nice fragrance. It's easy to wear, it's inoffensive, and it does pull a lot of compliments. And for the price, it can't be beat. I think I paid just under $25 for this bottle. Next up, we have John Varvatos JVNJ, or John Varvatos Nick Jonas Blue. So this fragrance got dumped on a lot when it first came out, because I think a lot of people were looking for the next great thing from John Varvatos. And while I will agree that this is an underwhelming fragrance at full retail of $100-something, I will say at discounted prices today, this is not a bad pickup. So you can usually find some of the smaller bottles for the Nick Jonas collection at around $22 or $23 and around $30 for the larger bottle. To me, this is great for springtime because it's like John Varvatos' take on the blue market. So this opens up with a lot of lime, mint, and pink pepper. It also has some herbal components to it. It's just very fresh, minty, and invigorating, but it also has kind of a watery feel to it as well. So overall, this is a really solid budget spring fragrance. It's also a more modern option. So a few of these fragrances on my list are, 10 to 20 years old. So this one falls more in line with what is more popular today. All right, next up we have from Issey Miyake, and that is L'Eau d'Issey pour Homme. So this fragrance is a classic. This was released sometime in the mid-1990s, and it is still popular and very wearable today. So this fragrance is perfect for spring because it opens up with a really nice citrus note of yuzu. So that's similar to a grapefruit, but it's a little more tart and a little more sour. The opening is extremely fresh and uplifting. And in addition to those citrus notes, it's also very watery with just a slight touch of florals underneath. So once this stuff dries down, it turns into this just clean and refreshing soapy scent. So if you can think of something like a bar of white soap that just smells clean and pleasant, that's really close to what you get here. This stuff is just a timeless classic, and if you are a fragrance collector, this is something that you really should have in your collection. All right, coming close to the end here. So next up we have Nautica Voyage Heritage. I know when it comes to Nautica fragrances, the obvious choice for most everybody is Nautica Voyage. While I do love that fragrance, I really lean a little bit more on Voyage Heritage for the springtime because it's a little more minty, fresh, and herbal. So Voyage Heritage opens up very refreshing with mint and an herbal quality underneath with lavender and rosemary, and it has just a touch of spiciness to it. Overall, it's just a very clean, refreshing, and slightly spicy fragrance, and you can usually find this for around $20 or under. Performance on this is about what you expect for a $20 fragrance. I get about 4 hours out of this with light to moderate projection. All right, next up we have Davidoff Cool Water. So Cool Water is arguably one of the best aquatic fragrances ever made. So this was released a little bit before 1990, and this stuff really changed the way fragrances were made. This stuff is very similar to Creed Green Irish Tweed. It's fresh. It's aquatic. It has a little mintiness and refreshing lavender. It's aquatic, fresh, green, and minty. This is also another classic fragrance that every person should have a bottle of. You can find this pretty much everywhere. You can get a bottle of this for around $18 or $19 at almost any rack store, so it's really easy to get. All right, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick review of a handful of budget spring fragrances that I really enjoy. If you like this type of content and you want to support the channel, please like and subscribe.